5 women tried to be his wife. Every single one ran away screaming in less than 7 days. The last one walked 8 miles through the scorching desert. She told the townsfolk she would rather die in that heat than spend one more night under his roof. They called Elias Crow cursed. Half Apache, half white. He belonged to no world. A man so haunted by the death of his first wife that he had forgotten how to let anyone in. So when 32-year-old Ruth Brooks stepped off that stagecoach, a widow who had already buried a husband and 3 children, everyone just started counting down the days. Day 1, day 2, day 3. But Ruth wasn't like the others. She didn't come looking for a fairy tale. She came looking for land under her feet and work that mattered. She came to stop running from grief and start building something real. The question was, could she survive past day 7? And what dark secret had driven all the others away? Real love isn't something you fall into. It's something you build, one honest conversation at a time, especially when it's terrifying. This story proves that 2 broken people don't make a disaster. They make a partnership if they're brave enough to stop protecting themselves and start trusting each other. If you believe in second chances and building something real from the ashes, drop a comment telling me what you've chosen to fight for. And if you want more stories about imperfect people finding their way to each other, hit subscribe and ring that bell. Your support means everything. The stagecoach groaned into Dry Hollow, a town that looked like it was one bad dust storm away from disappearing. Inside, 32-year-old Ruth Hannah Brooks looked out at her new life. She was a practical woman with a clean but mended dress and hair already showing streaks of gray. She knew survival was an art, and she was a master. The grizzled driver, a man named Polk, stopped the coach but did not offer her a hand. He just looked at her with pity. "You sure about this, ma'am?" he grumbled. Ruth stepped down into the dust on her own. "I am sure that I am here," she said plainly. "That is all that matters for now." Mr. Polk just pointed a thumb north. "The Crow Ranch is 8 miles that way." "He will either come for you or he will not," the driver said, dumping her trunk onto the ground. With that, the stagecoach rattled off, leaving Ruth all alone. The door to the general store creaked open, and a woman with suspicious eyes stepped out. "You are the new one," she said. It was not a question. "I am Ruth Brooks. I have an arrangement with Mr. Elias Crow." The woman, Mrs. Bledsoe, gave a sharp, humorless laugh. "An arrangement? You know about the others, I suppose." "I know 5 women came before me, and I know they all left." "Left is a polite word for it," Mrs. Bledsoe said, crossing her arms. "The last one came back walking 8 miles through the August heat. She said she would rather die in the desert than spend one more night in that man's house. Said he was a savage, and that he looked at her like she was already a ghost." Mrs. Bledsoe leaned in. "Take my advice. Get on tomorrow's stage and go back where you came from. Nothing out there is worth it." But Ruth just squared her shoulders. "Thank you for your concern, but I do not run from things anymore." Just then, a silence fell over the street. A big, powerful horse was coming, and on its back sat a man who looked like he was carved from the same rock as the mountains. It was Elias Crow. He was tall, with dark hair and skin the color of old copper. His heritage was written on his face, a mix of his cavalry scout father and his Apache mother. He wore simple work clothes and carried no gun, only a knife at his side. He stopped his horse and just looked at Ruth, his gaze so intense it felt like he could see right through her. Now she understood why the other women had run. "Miss Brooks," he said. His voice was deep and rough. "Mr. Crow," Ruth replied, meeting his gaze without fear. "You are older than I expected," he stated. "And you are exactly as you were described," she shot back. "I suppose we are both managing our disappointments." A corner of his mouth twitched, something that was almost a smile. He dismounted and lifted her trunk onto the horse like it weighed nothing. This close, she could see a thin scar near his hairline and the hard calluses on his hands. "Can you ride?" he asked. Not well, Ruth admitted honestly, but I am a fast learner. He nodded, then swung back into the saddle and offered her a hand. She took it and let him pull her up behind him. She had no choice but to wrap her arms around his waist. She could feel the hard muscle of his back and smell the scent of leather and sage. They rode out of town without another word. As they left Dry Hollow, Ruth saw Mrs. Bledsoe watching them go, her face grim. Then the town vanished, and there was only the vast, empty desert. After an hour of silence, Elias pointed to a thin line of green in the distance. Water, he said. There is a stream that runs all year. It is the only reason the ranch can survive. Is the ranch near the water? Ruth asked. Close enough to pipe it in, he said. I built the system myself 3 years ago. Ruth took a breath and asked the question that hung in the air. Was that before or after your first wife? She felt him go completely still. The silence that followed was heavy and sharp. The comfortable quiet was gone, replaced by something dangerous. After, he finally said, his voice tight. Long after. Ruth tucked that piece of information away. The other women had whispered about his first wife, an Apache woman he had loved fiercely. They said he was still haunted by her ghost, leaving no room for anyone else. That is your loss, Ruth said plainly. It was a long time ago. Elias Crow looked back at her. Grief does not care about the calendar. He was right. You have lost someone. By our age, everyone has. It either breaks you or it teaches you. Which was it for you? Ruth answered honestly. Both. But I am still standing. Elias gave a slow nod, as if she had just confirmed something for him. He faced forward again. Another hour to the ranch, he said. His voice was flat, like he was talking about the weather. The horse will need a rest. Then I will show you the place and the work. We will see if you last longer than the others. Ruth replied, I will last, Mr. Crow. You can bet on that. We will see. The Crow Ranch rose out of the heat like a dream. It was nestled in a bend of the river surrounded by tall cottonwood trees. Ruth had pictured a rough cabin. But this was a proper home, built from adobe in the old Spanish style. It had thick walls to keep out the heat and an expensive tile roof. A porch wrapped around 2 sides, decorated with pots of wildflowers. This ranch was not just surviving. It was built to endure for generations. You built all this? She asked. I built some. The rest was already here. I bought it from the bank and fixed it up. Elias swung down from his horse and helped Ruth down. He started unsaddling the animal with practiced hands. Your room is on the south side of the house. It stays cooler, he said, not looking at her. I am on the north side. Ruth was relieved they would have separate rooms. He kept talking. The barn needs cleaning. The garden needs weeding. The chickens and the milk cow need tending. Firewood needs to be split and water needs to be hauled. He finally turned to look her in the eye. I work from sunup to sundown to keep this place going. I do not need a woman who expects to be treated like delicate china. His jaw tightened. The other women wanted me to wait on them while they sat inside complaining about the dust. That is not what I need. I need a partner, Miss Brooks. Someone who knows that out here, everyone has to pull their weight. Ruth set down her bag. Mr. Crow, I am not delicate china. I am 32 years old. I have buried a husband and 3 children. I ran a boarding house in St. Louis for 5 years. I am tired of working for other people's dreams. I want a life that is mine. I want land under my feet and work that matters, she continued, her voice steady. I do not know how to clean a barn, but I learn fast. Tell me what needs doing, and I will do it. But do not think for a second that I am here to be managed. I'm here to build something. The only question is if you are ready for a partner like that. The world went quiet. Ruth could hear the wind in the trees and her own heart pounding. Then Elias Crow smiled. The smile changed his whole face, washing away the hardness. "Come on," he said, grabbing her trunk. "I will show you the house. We can start with the chickens. They are the least likely to hurt you if you mess up." Inside, the house was cool and dark. The main room had a big stone fireplace and handsome handmade furniture. Beautiful woven blankets with red and black patterns hung on the walls. "My mother made those," Elias said. "She taught me to weave, said it teaches you patience." He set her trunk by a door. "This is your room. It is simple, but it is yours. We eat simple too. Meat, beans, and cornbread." Ruth walked into the bedroom. The room was plain but clean. A narrow bed was covered with one of the blankets. A simple dresser stood against one wall. A window looked out over the fields. Someone had put a small jar of wildflowers on the windowsill. "Did you put these flowers here?" Ruth asked. Elias looked a little embarrassed. "I thought a woman might like them." "That was thoughtful, thank you." He nodded. "Change into your work clothes. Meet me outside in 10 minutes. After he left, Ruth stood in the quiet room. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles to marry a man she did not know. She had no family left, no one to fall back on. For the first time since sickness took her family, she felt something besides emptiness. She felt alive. Ruth quickly changed into an old dress and tied her hair back. She went outside, ready for whatever came next. The chickens were simple enough. Ruth learned to feed them and check for eggs. 17 birds, Elias told her. "Enough for us to eat. Just watch out for the rooster. He is mean." Next was the milk cow, Bella. The cow needed to be talked to constantly to stay calm. Ruth's hands were clumsy at first, but she soon found the rhythm. "You are a good girl, Bella," Ruth murmured. "Almost done." "She likes you," Elias said from the doorway. "She usually kicks." "I get along with stubborn females," Ruth said, not looking up. The afternoon was a whirlwind of lessons. Elias showed her the garden and the system he built to water it. He showed her the smokehouse and the root cellar. He explained how he moved the cattle from pasture to pasture. He pointed out the dangers, from flash floods to rattlesnakes. He talked more in those few hours than he probably had in months. Ruth listened carefully, soaking it all in. As the sun began to set, Elias asked, "Do you remember all that?" "Most of it. What I forget, I will ask about." He seemed surprised. "The others never asked questions." Ruth straightened up, wiping sweat from her brow. "Mr. Crow, I will say this one time. I am not the others. That is their story. In my story, I ask questions until I understand. Because understanding is the only real power a person has." Elias just looked at her for a long moment. "You are not what I expected." "Good or bad?" she asked. He almost smiled. "It is too soon to tell." A sound that might have been approval. That night, Ruth cooked a simple supper. Beans and salt pork, skillet cornbread, and wild greens from near the arroyo. Elias ate without a word, but he cleaned his plate and took a second piece of cornbread. "You can cook," he finally said. "The last one couldn't boil water without burning it." Later on the porch, he made her an offer. "This is a hard life. I'm not an easy man. If you want to leave before the week is out, I'll take you back to town. No questions asked." Ruth looked him square in the eye. "Is that what you want?" "I want you to choose freely," he said. "Not because you're trapped." "Elias," she said softly, "I have nothing to go back to. I came here to build something. And what I see is a good man who works hard and is honest about what he needs. That's more than most men offer. I'm not leaving." He just stared at her for a long moment in the starlight. 7 days, he said. The others never made it past 7. If you're still here on day 8, we'll talk. Her second day started before dawn. "Coffee's on the stove," Elias called. "We ride in 15 minutes. They rode out to check the herd, about 30 head, as the sky turned gray. He taught her how to count them, how to spot an animal in trouble from a distance, how to read the herd like a language. It was a language of survival. Later, they found the broken fence. 3 rails knocked loose. "This has to be fixed before they wander off," Elias said, swinging down from his horse. "You can head back to the house." "Or I can help," she replied. "Ever use a hammer?" "For 5 years," she said. He gave her a rare, full smile. "All right, then. Let's see what you can do." The work was brutal. Ruth held the heavy rails steady while Elias hammered, her arms shaking with the strain. Her hands were raw by the time they finished, but the fence was solid. Elias looked at her with newfound respect. "You're tougher than you look," he said. The days fell into a rhythm of hard work. She learned he sang to the cattle, wordless tunes like the wind itself. He learned she was a quick study who didn't need to be told things twice. On the 4th day, they found a dead snake fouling a water tank. "Damn it," Elias cursed. "That's a half-day's work to drain and scrub." Ruth studied the problem. "What if we siphon most of the water for the garden? Then we just have to scrub and refill." He blinked, surprised. "That would work. Why didn't I think of that?" "Because you're one man doing the work of 3, she said. "That's what partners are for." In those first days, they learned each other in silence. Ruth discovered Elias sang low, wordless tunes to the cattle at dawn. She saw how he checked the creek bed every single day, his jaw set with worry over the water that kept this dry land alive. Elias learned Ruth was a quiet worker who rose before the sun, and that when she did speak, her words had weight. On the 4th day, they found a dead snake floating in the far pasture's water tank, spoiling the whole supply. Elias swore under his breath. "That is a full half-day of work, draining and scrubbing." Ruth looked at it. "What if we siphon the water to the garden? Then we only have to scrub and refill." Elias just stared at her for a moment. "Well, I will be. Why did I not think of that?" Ruth gave a small smile. "Because you are one man doing the work of 3. That is what partners are for." That evening over supper, he finally asked, "Why did you leave St. Louis?" "The owner of the boarding house I ran died," she said. "His son sold the place. I had 2 weeks to find a new life. Then I read your letter." "What about it made you come all this way?" "It was honest," she said. "You didn't promise a thing but hard work and partnership." He was quiet for a long time. "My wife was Apache," he said, his voice low. "Her name was Deste. We built this place together. She died giving birth to our first child. The baby died with her." Ruth's heart ached for him. "The other women," he continued, "they wanted me to forget her, to take down her weavings, to pretend she never existed. I couldn't do it." "So they ran," Ruth finished for him, understanding it all. "They ran because you wouldn't erase her." He finally met her eyes across the table. "And when you look at me?" she asked. "I see someone," he said slowly, "who knows a man can honor his dead and still build a life with the living." Romance, but it was truth, and the truth was a foundation Ruth could build a life on. On the 5th day, while Ruth was feeding the chickens, she heard horses coming in fast, 3 of them. Out here, that usually meant trouble. Elias stepped out of the barn, his body gone stiff, and for the first time Ruth saw he had a gun belt strapped to his waist. "Get inside," he said quietly. "Don't come out." "What is it?" "It is Bledsoe's horses. He only rides out this far to cause a problem." Ruth backed onto the porch but went no further as the 3 riders entered the yard. It was Mr. Bledsoe from the store, another man she did not know, and surprisingly, Mrs. Bledsoe. "Crow," Bledsoe called out. "We came to check on Miss Brooks." "It is Mrs. Crow," Ruth corrected, stepping forward. "We were married by common law 3 days ago, and I am just fine." Mrs. Bledsoe's eyes were kind but full of worry. "Honey, we just want to be sure you know you have a place to go if you need it." "I appreciate that, ma'am, but I am here by choice, and I would thank you all to respect that." Bledsoe shifted in his saddle. It is just that Crow has a reputation. His ways are different. Different how? Ruth asked, her voice sharp. Because he is Apache? Because he honors his first wife's memory? Because he wants a partner, not a decoration? The younger man with them spat on the ground. Because that blood runs wild, lady. Elias tensed beside her, ready to fight, but Ruth laid a hand on his arm. I will handle this. Her voice turned cold as ice. Get off our land, all of you. Do not come back unless you are invited. Mrs. Bledsoe looked like she wanted to argue, but her husband just turned his horse. It is your funeral, lady. As they rode away, Ruth felt Elias's hand cover hers. You called me your husband. You are my husband, and you did not need defending. They were not worried about me. They were offended by you. There is a difference. The next morning, Ruth woke up alone. A note on the table read, Gone to North Range, back by dark. She was washing clothes when she heard a terrible squawking from the chicken coop. A coyote had slipped through a gap in the fence. Without thinking, Ruth grabbed a thick stick from the woodpile and ran toward the sound. The coyote had a hen in its mouth. Ruth charged in, yelling and swinging the stick, beating the animal's back. It dropped the hen and turned on her, snarling, its teeth bared. The coyote lunged. Ruth swung the stick again and hit its head hard, sending it stumbling back. It began to circle her, looking for a way in. Suddenly, a rifle shot cracked the air, and the coyote fell dead. Elias was standing 30 feet away, his face pale with fear. Are you hurt? He asked, rushing to her side, his hands checking her arms and shoulders. Did it bite you? I am fine. It never touched me. To hell with the chickens, he said, his voice rough. He cupped her face in his hands. You could have been killed. You should have stayed inside. And lose 3 good hens? Do you know how long it takes to raise a good hen? He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pulled her into a hug so tight she could hardly breathe. She could feel him shaking. Do not ever do that again, he whispered into her hair. Please. Only if you promise to fix that fence. He actually laughed. Deal. After they had mended the fence, Ruth finally admitted, I have never been so scared in my life. You did not look scared. You looked like you were wrestling angels. I was terrified, but the chickens needed me and you were not here. Elias grew quiet. Ruth, I need to tell you something. The other women, they left because I tried to protect them from everything, from the work, from the hardship. I thought that is what a man was supposed to do. That is not protection, Elias. That is a prison. I know that now. My first wife, Datesta, used to tell me the same thing. She said I treated her like she was made of glass. When she died, I thought I had not protected her enough. So with the others, I smothered them. He looked her straight in the eye. But you fight coyotes with a stick. You want a partnership. I am not sure I remember how to do that. Ruth closed the small space between them. Then we will learn together. Because I do not know how to be a ranch wife, but I am learning. He looked down at her, a small smile on his face. Tomorrow is day 7, you know. None of the others made it to day 7. Ruth smiled back. Elias, I will be here on day 800. But we should probably ride to town and make this marriage legal. A partnership means shared ownership. I want my name on the property deed. He blinked, surprised, then he nodded slowly. No problem at all. We can ride to town tomorrow. Good, she said. Then we have a plan. That night, Ruth lay awake, thinking how 7 days had changed her whole world. A week ago, she was a failure stepping off a stagecoach. Now she was in a home with a man she was starting to trust. She heard Elias's footsteps stop at her door. A quiet knock followed. Ruth, are you awake? Yes. He hesitated. I just wanted to say thank you for staying. for seeing the man I am, not the one everyone talks about. Ruth opened the door. In the dim light, he looked unguarded. I see a good man who works hard and has the courage to start over, she said softly. What other people see is their own failing, not yours. He gave a slow nod. Good night, Ruth. Good night, Elias. As she went back to bed, she felt something new bloom in her chest. It was hope. The next morning, Elias was already waiting. I thought we could ride to town, he said. Get the marriage done and file the paperwork. Ruth smiled. Let me get ready. They rode into Dry Hollow to the same staring eyes that had greeted her a week before. But this time, Ruth walked into the general store with her head held high, Elias right beside her. Mrs. Bledsoe looked up, her eyes wide. You are still here. It is Mrs. Crow now, Ruth said gently. We need to make it official. The judge is over at the church, the older woman said, her tone shifting from surprise to a kind of grudging respect. He can handle the marriage and the property deed. As they left, Mrs. Bledsoe called out, Mrs. Crow? I believe I owe you an apology. We were wrong about you. Elias simply tipped his head. Outside, Ruth took his hand. It is a start, she said. The circuit judge was a practical man who had them married and the deed filed in under 10 minutes. Congratulations, he said, closing his book. May your partnership be a long one. It will be, Ruth said, her voice full of certainty. As they rode out of town, Elias looked over at her. Day 8 starts tomorrow. Ruth shook her head. Day 8 started the moment we filed those papers. We are not just trying anymore, Elias, we are building. A real smile finally reached his eyes. Back at the ranch, a storm was gathering, with dark clouds boiling over the mountains. We need to secure everything, Elias said, already moving. They worked as a team, a rhythm they had learned over 7 days. They shuttered windows, sheltered the animals, and tied down anything the wind might take. When the first drops of rain fell, they were ready. The storm hit with a wild fury, the wind screaming and thunder shaking the very walls of the house. Standing on the porch, watching the beautiful, terrifying power of it all, Ruth felt truly alive. Are you scared? Elias shouted over the roar. No, she said, and she meant it. He looked at her with a new understanding. I thought I just needed someone who would not run away, he said. But what I really needed was someone who would run toward the challenges, toward the work, toward me. Ruth thought for a second. I ran toward a new life. You just happened to be the best part of it. He smiled. I will take that. The storm howled all evening, rattling the little house. Over a cold meal, Elias looked out into the dark. I am glad you are here, he said. I am glad you stayed. She nodded. Me too. Long after midnight, the storm finally gave up. Ruth found Elias on the porch, looking over the moonlit damage. How bad is it? She asked. Could be worse, he said. The house and barn are fine. The animals are safe. They stood together, looking at the ranch that was now hers too. I have been thinking, she said. I spent 3 years running from grief. I thought coming here was just running towards something new, but maybe I had to run far enough to finally stop. He listened, letting her find the words. This place, this life with you, it does not erase what I lost, but it gives me something real to build. Elias took her hand. I am here too, Ruth, not as some man whose brides all run away, just as myself, as your husband. And I am here as your wife, she finished. They stood like that until the sky began to lighten. Come on, Ruth said, her voice steady again. We have a ranch to run. The weeks that followed were a quiet discovery. Ruth learned Elias sang old Apache songs when he worked and could track a lost calf over 3 miles of solid rock. She also learned he had a deep fear of wildfire. In turn, Elias learned that Ruth sometimes woke from nightmares, reaching for children who were not there. He saw how she could calculate feed costs in her head faster than he could with a pencil. He learned she was a woman who saw systems where he only saw chores. They fell into a rhythm, dividing the work to match their strengths. He handled the cattle and heavy labor. She managed the house, the chickens, and the garden, making sure they had enough to last the seasons. They worked side by side, learning to move together like a team. But they were still strangers where it counted most. They shared a roof, but not a life. The distance between them was a quiet, heavy thing. That started to change with a letter. Ruth picked it up on her monthly supply run to town. The postmistress, Mrs. Bledsoe, was full of curiosity. "From back east," she noted. "Family?" "Something like that," Ruth said, tucking it away. She did not want an audience for this news, whatever it was. She waited until she was back at the ranch with the supplies put away and Elias out on the range. Only then, alone at her kitchen table, did she break the seal. The letter was from her only friend in St. Louis, Margaret Chen. Margaret's words hit Ruth like a fist. The fever had returned to St. Louis. The same sickness that had taken Ruth's own children 3 years ago was raging through the city again. Margaret wrote of neighbors and friends, now gone. If Ruth had stayed, she might be dead too. Instead, she was here, in this solid house, with a man who kept his promises. She was alive. The guilt that came with that truth felt sharp and cruel. Elias found her there as the sun set, the letter in her hands, tears tracking paths through the dust on her cheeks. He saw the rigid way she held herself, as if she might fall to pieces. Instead of retreating, he stepped forward. "Ruth?" Her voice cracked. "It is back. The fever in St. Louis." Elias's words were meant to comfort, but they broke the dam inside her. 3 years of grief came pouring out. "I could not save my children," she sobbed. "I watched them burn with fever, watched them fight for every breath. Then my husband, he just gave up. He stopped eating and drank himself into the grave. I could not save anyone who mattered." The sorrow was so deep it shook her entire body. Elias moved around the table without a second thought. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as she cried against his chest. He had wanted to hold her just like this since the day she'd faced down that coyote, so brave and so alive. "You saved yourself," he whispered into her hair. "Does that count for anything when everyone else is gone?" she asked, her voice muffled. "Yes," he said, his own voice firm with the weight of experience. "It counts. Living is hard. Choosing to keep going when you have nothing left is the hardest thing in the world. Do not you ever think that is small." Ruth pulled back, her face a mess of tears. "How do you do it?" Elias admitted. "I almost did not. After I lost my wife, Deteste, and our baby, I tried to drink myself to death, same as your husband. My uncle came and dragged me back from that edge. He told me dying was easy. He said living was the real test of courage." Elias paused, his gaze steady on hers. "You honor your family by living well, Ruth, by building something new, not by letting their passing be the end of your story, too." She leaned against him, completely spent. "I am so tired of hurting." "I know," he said, his arms tightening around her. "But the weight gets lighter when someone helps you carry it." They sat in the quiet dark until the tears stopped. "I am sorry," she said finally. "Do not apologize for being human," he replied. "We all break. What matters is putting yourself back together again." For the first time since arriving at the ranch, Ruth slept through the night. She woke to find Elias had already gone out, leaving her a note that simply said, "Rest. I will handle things." She sat on the porch, watching the sun paint the sky, and thought about his words. Living was the real courage. She decided she was going to believe him. When Elias returned, he found her in the garden, weeding with a new kind of energy. "You look better," he said, a hint of a smile in his voice. "I feel better," she answered, sitting back on her heels. "Or at least I feel ready." "I have been thinking about what you said," Ruth began, her voice clear and strong. about honoring the dead by living well. I cannot help the orphans back in St. Louis, but what if we built something here? Not an orphanage, but a sanctuary. A place that could give work to people who need it, feed folks who are hungry, and be a safe harbor in these hard times. Elias looked at her, intrigued. What are you thinking? I am thinking this land can support more than just us. I am thinking there are other women out there like me, widows and wanderers who need a place to belong. If I cannot save the people I left behind, maybe I can help the ones who come next. That is a big dream, Elias said slowly. We are barely managing as it is. That is because we are thinking small, she replied, a fire in her eyes. Come with me. I want to show you something. In the small office, she spread his ranch records across the desk. She had studied them for weeks. Look at your water usage, she said, pointing to the maps. The arroyo runs along the entire eastern edge, but you are not using it. If we built a few smaller troughs out there, we could graze more cattle. More cattle means more income. Elias leaned over the map, seeing the logic in her words. That land is rough, but the cattle that can handle it are worth more. Still, it would take money we do not have. Not yet, Ruth corrected. But if we sold 10 head from the current herd, we would have the money to invest. A small loss now for a big gain later. Elias straightened up, looking at her with a whole new level of respect. You have been planning this. I have been thinking, she said. Now I need you to tell me. Is this impossible, or is it just difficult? He studied the maps for a long moment, his mind calculating. Finally, he looked up at her. It is difficult, very difficult. A slow smile spread across his face. But it is not impossible. I am sorry, was all he said. But his voice was kind. Later, he told her about a dream he had for the ranch, a way to expand by finding new water sources. It is a big risk, he admitted. The best things usually are, she replied. For the first time, a real smile lit up his face. All right, let's do it. We start small. That night, they planned together, full of a new shared energy. I should have asked for your help weeks ago, Elias said. You see things I miss. And you see things I miss, Ruth said. That is why a partnership works. She paused, then asked softly, Thank you for last night. He nodded. You are the strongest person I know, Ruth. As they finished the dishes, she finally asked the question she had held back for so long. Did your first wife cry when things were hard? He leaned against the counter and answered her honestly. All the time. Desta always said her people treated feelings like a big Texas thunderstorm. You do not fight it, you just ride it out. She felt everything, and you always knew where you stood with her. Elias smiled at the memory. Do you wish I was more like that? Ruth asked. No, he said, quick and sure. I do not want you to be anyone but yourself. I need someone different now, not someone trying to take her place. Ruth dried her hands. I am glad you talk about her. The fact that you still love her does not bother me. It makes me trust you more. Why is that? Because a man who honors his lost love like that is a man who takes loving someone seriously. That is a rare thing. He stepped closer. Can I ask you something? Do you think eventually you could love me? The question was honest and raw. She thought about his quiet strength and how he had held her when she was broken without trying to fix her. He saw how she handled the animals with a gentle strength that was a wonder to watch. In this quiet place, she finally felt like herself again. I think I already love you, she said softly. Not that storybook kind of love. The real kind. The kind you build on trust and respect. Something that grows slow but has deep roots. Elias let out a breath he'd been holding for a long time. That's the only kind that lasts, he said. It's different from what I had with Destai. That love was a wildfire, burning hot and fast. What we're building here, he said, is steadier. It's made to weather the storms, not burn out in 'em. Ruth leaned into his touch. We'll learn how to do this together, he promised. That night, the space between their rooms felt like patience, not distance. They were building something to last. The next morning, they started on the first water station. Ruth learned to work the hard desert soil as Elias showed her the reddish clay deep down. This here is good, he explained. It holds water. My uncle taught me some, Elias said. The rest, I learned by trying and failing. As the sun beat down, they heard riders coming slow. Elias went stiff. That ain't a good sound, he muttered. Nobody comes out here unless they want something. 3 riders appeared over the rise. 2 rough-looking men and a younger woman with hard eyes. The leader, a man with a wicked scar through his eyebrow, stopped his horse about 20 feet away. He looked from the dig site to Elias, then gave Ruth a long, assassin stare. Heard the half-breed got himself a new wife, he drawled. Had to come see for myself. Elias reached for his knife, but Ruth stepped forward first. My name is Mrs. Crow, she said, her voice like ice. The man, Carson, just grinned, showing yellow teeth. Feisty one, ain't she? Name's Carson. We work the Morrison place. Heard you're looking to expand and might need some hands. Ruth was stunned. They'd only just made that plan. Word traveled mighty fast in these parts. We might be, she said carefully. Why you asking? Morrison's selling out to the railroad, Carson said. That's 40 hands out of a job come fall. Carson nodded towards the hole in the ground. Looks like y'all are serious. We know irrigation and livestock. We could use steady work. Elias finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. And why would I hire any of you? Because, the other man, Tom, piped up, good hands won't work for an Indian, no offense. That just leaves folks like us, desperate enough not to care. I care about honesty, Ruth shot back before Elias could get mad. The woman, Grace, spoke for the first time. We ain't thieves and we ain't troublemakers. We're just telling you straight that we need the work. That's as honest as it gets out here. Ruth saw the desperation behind their tough talk. They were on the edge, betting everything on a mixed-race rancher and his mail-order bride. How many good workers are we talking about? Ruth asked. Out of the 40, Grace said. Maybe 10 or 12 are worth a damn. The rest are drifters. And if you hire, Carson added, the good ones will come. Ruth glanced at Elias. She saw the struggle in his eyes. He needed the help, but trust in strangers went against every instinct he had. We are not hiring just yet, Ruth announced firmly. We're still building. But you come back in 3 months. If we're ready, we'll consider experienced hands. The pay will be fair, but the work will be hard. And anyone who disrespects my husband will be gone before sundown. Is that clear? Carson tipped his hat. Crystal, Mrs. Crow. We'll be back. As they rode off, Elias said quietly, that was a risk, giving them hope like that. Or it brings us the workers we need, Ruth countered. Besides, I only said we'd consider it. Now all the good hands for Morrison's will know we might be hiring. Let 'em compete for the spots. A slow smile spread across Elias's face. I can't decide if you're brilliant or reckless. Can I be both? She asked. With you, he said. I reckon so. They got back to work, but something had changed. Their private dream was suddenly very public. They weren't just building a ranch for themselves anymore. That night, Elias admitted his fear. If we hire people, it all changes. We'll have folks depending on us, watching our every move. You're scared of growing too big, Ruth said gently. Scared you'll lose what makes this place special. I'm scared of the same thing. But we get to decide what we build here. We can build something we're proud of, with fair wages and respect for everyone. That's mighty idealistic, he said. So was coming out here to marry a stranger, she replied. Elias laughed, and the tension broke. All right, he agreed. We do it your way, but we hire slow and fire fast. Over the next few weeks, as they finished the first water station, a slow trickle of workers came by. Ruth handled them all. She was direct and fair, making no promises, but keeping hope alive. She and Elias started making a list of who might be worth hiring when the time came. The water station took 6 long weeks. When they finally opened the valves, it was more than just a victory. It was the foundation of everything that was to come. As water trickled into the new cistern, a hard-won victory, Ruth felt a deep satisfaction. It works, she said, almost in disbelief. Elias nodded. It works. We can move 10 head of cattle out here next week. He looked out toward the mountains, a place of distant dreams. And if they do well, we'll build another and then another. We'll build something that lasts. Taking his calloused hand, she felt a surge of pride. For the first time since losing her family, she wasn't just surviving, she was building. This place, once just his, now felt like home. Their success was a double-edged sword. Word spread like wildfire, and soon, hopeful workers arrived looking for a chance. The weight of their dream and of these new lives settled on their shoulders. But it was a lone rider from the south that would test everything. On a cold October morning, Ruth saw him approach. She knew he was Apache from the way he rode, proud and steady. He stopped his horse 30 feet away, his old eyes taking her measure. He was maybe 60, his face a roadmap of desert sun and hard years, yet he carried himself with a quiet dignity. You are the one who stayed, he said, his voice a low rumble. I'm Ruth Crow, she answered. And yes, I stayed. The others ran from my nephew, the man said. You did not. This is either courage or foolishness. I came to see which. Ruth understood then. You're Elias's uncle, Nachi. He gave a slight nod. He told you of me. Good. A woman should know the whole man she marries. I will wait for him. First, show me this place, and show me the woman who finally stayed. Nachi walked through their small home, his eyes missing nothing. He paused at the beautiful weavings made by Elias's first wife, Deste, gently touching the fabric. Ruth saw the flicker of old grief in his eyes. She was my sister's daughter, he said softly. Elias told me how much he loved her, Ruth said. Nachi looked at her, his gaze sharp. And this does not anger you? You are not jealous of a dead woman? No, Ruth said, her voice clear. A man who can love that deeply is a man I can trust. Nachi studied her. The others were jealous. They demanded he forget her, and trying to do so nearly destroyed him. You cannot build a future by erasing the past, Ruth replied. You just create an empty space. I'd rather build on a solid foundation. What has taught you this wisdom, he asked. Loss, she said simply. I buried my husband and my children. Grief becomes a part of you. You learn to live with it. Nachi nodded, a deep understanding passing between them. Come, he said, his voice softer. Show me what you two have built together. As they walked the ranch, Nachi asked a hard question. You plan for many workers. What happens when white men must take orders from my nephew or from a woman? We can't control their pride, Ruth answered plainly. We can only control who we keep on our payroll. If we have to choose between profit and principle, we choose principle. For the first time, Nachi smiled, and it changed his whole face. My nephew has chosen better than he knows. The others only saw a man torn between two worlds. You see a whole man, worthy of respect. Just then, Elias rode up. He froze when he saw his uncle, a storm of emotions crossing his face before he dismounted. Nachi spoke to him in Apache, and the tension slowly left Elias's shoulders. Elias answered, gesturing to Ruth, and what he said made his old uncle let out a full, genuine laugh. "He tells me you fought a coyote with a stick for his chickens," Nachi said, turning back to Ruth, "and that you want to build something that will outlast you both. These are high compliments." Ruth blushed. "He exaggerates." "No," Elias said quietly, meeting her eyes. "I do not." That evening, the truth finally came out. Over dinner, Nachi looked at them both. "I came here expecting to find another failure," he said bluntly. "I expected to find my nephew making the same old mistake." "What mistake?" Ruth asked. "His fear," Nachi explained. "With the other women, he was afraid. Afraid that if they saw the real work, the real danger of this life, they would leave. So he tried to protect them, to keep them separate. He built them a cage out of his love, and they left anyway, because no one can live in a cage." Elias stared at his plate, his jaw tight, the hard truth finally laid bare. Nachi looked at Ruth. "With this one, I see a partner. She works beside you, takes risks. You have learned a partnership means letting go of control." "I am still learning," Elias admitted. "The need to protect her is strong." "That is just fear wearing the mask of care," the old man said. Ruth put her fork down. "Nachi, may I ask about Deste?" "Elias told me she died in childbirth, but not why he blames himself. I need to know what I am up against here." A heavy silence fell. Nachi looked from a stricken Elias to Ruth. "My nephew blames himself for many things," Nachi said slowly. "Her death is the biggest. He had been learning new medicine and thought he could make the birth safer. Instead, he lost both the mother and the child." His face was a mask of old pain. "You tried to deliver the baby yourself." "I thought I could help," he whispered, his voice cracking. "The midwife was 2 days out. I read the books, but I made it all worse. She died because of my pride." "Or she died because childbirth is a dangerous thing," Ruth said firmly. "You cannot know you made it worse. You just needed a place to put the blame." Nachi watched her. "You know this from experience. My children died of fever. My husband did everything right, but the doctor blamed him anyway. The guilt destroyed my husband." She looked straight at Elias, her voice steady. "Sometimes terrible things just happen, and no one is at fault. The doctor could not admit his limits, so he blamed a grieving father. Deste's death is not proof you failed. It is proof you loved her enough to fight for her even when you were scared. You cannot shield me from sorrow by keeping me at a distance, Elias. That only robs us of the time we actually have. I would rather live a full life with the risk of heartbreak than a half-life built on fear." Nachi then spoke to Elias in Apache, a long and heartfelt speech. When he was done, the old man turned to Ruth and explained, "I told him he has been given a rare gift, a woman who understands that you cannot have love without the risk of loss. I said that his Deste would be angry, that he wasted 9 years being afraid to live." Ruth asked him quietly, "What did he say back?" Nachi placed a hand on his nephew's shoulder. "He said that for you and for her memory, he would finally try." Later that night, sitting on the porch in the cold, Elias finally broke the silence. "I'm sorry I never told you the truth about Deste. I was ashamed." "Shame is a worthless feeling unless it makes you change your ways," Ruth said gently. "Honor her by being honest with me now." His voice was thick with emotion. "I am terrified of losing you, Ruth. Truly terrified. With Deste, I did not realize what I had until she was gone. But with you, I know exactly what I stand to lose every single day." She moved closer to him. "I am scared too. But watching you build this ranch alone for 9 years taught me something. That was not stubbornness. That was you moving towards something better. You just did not know it was me you were waiting for." "I need to tell you about the other women," Elias said into the darkness, "the ones who left. The first, Mary, left because I treated her like a child who could not be trusted to go to town alone. I thought I was protecting her. The second one, Eleanor, wanted to work the cattle right alongside me. She wanted to be a real partner. But I kept making excuses for her to stay in the house to keep her safe from the work. She left because there is nothing more lonely than being protected from life itself. Catherine, the third one, lasted only 4 days because I would barely speak to her. The fourth, Sarah, was a lot like you. She had ideas for the ranch, but I shut down everyone. I was too afraid of losing control. And the fifth, Julia, was a kind woman. But I judged her for everything she did that was not the way Deste would have done it. She finally told me she could not compete with a ghost. Ruth listened, understanding the pattern. So you were never ready for a partner. You were just trying to control everything so you would not get hurt again. Yes, he admitted. By the time I wrote for you, I was desperate enough to be honest with the agency. I told them I needed someone strong enough for a man who was still learning how to let someone in. What changed? Ruth asked. Why did I not run away too? Because I was finally trying to change when you arrived, he said. And you met me halfway. But I have to know, are you staying because you want to, or because you have no other place to go? Ruth considered his question. When I first came here, I was staying because I had no other options. But somewhere between the hard work and the long talks, something changed. I stopped staying because I had to, and I started staying because I wanted to. This life with you is my first choice, Elias. It is my only choice, especially now that I know you have failed before. It means you understand that building something that lasts takes more than one try. To keep trying after 5 failures takes a special kind of grit. Elias pulled her close and Ruth leaned into his warmth. The October air had a bite to it, but against his side, she felt truly safe for the first time since losing her children. I am going to try to be a better partner, Elias said softly. I will mess up, but I will keep trying. We both will. They stayed on that porch until the chill finally chased them inside. For the very first time, Elias walked her to her bedroom and kissed her forehead. Thank you for staying, he whispered, for seeing the real me. Leaning against her closed door, Ruth's heart pounded. Everything had changed between them. There was no going back to being careful strangers. They would either build something real or break from the weight of it all. She had always been one to run toward a challenge, and she was not about to stop now. In the morning, she found the men already in the kitchen, speaking quietly in Apache over their coffee. Nachi stood when he saw her. I am leaving today, he said plainly, but I go with a lighter heart. My nephew has found what he was searching for. Will you come back when we hire more hands? We could use your guidance. Nachi smiled. I will return in the spring. You two see things clearly. You will solve most of your own problems. He gripped Elias's shoulder, spoke a few words in Apache, then mounted his horse. Before he rode off, he looked at Ruth. You take care of my nephew. He is not as tough as he looks. We take care of each other, she replied. Yes, he said, nodding. That is why you will succeed. After he was gone, a quiet understanding settled between them. My uncle liked you, Elias said. He does not like many people. What did he say to you? She asked. He said, this one will stay through the storms, nephew. Hold on to her. Then he said the 7th day had passed. It was time to stop counting and start living. Ruth felt the truth of those words settle in her bones. He is right. He is... The testing is over, so what comes next for us? Ruth took his hand and it felt right. We stop sleeping in separate rooms like strangers, she said. We stop being so careful with each other. We start living like we believe this will last. A slow, genuine smile spread across Elias's face. I can do that. I want to do that. A new ease settled between them as they worked that day. The walls they had kept up for so long finally came down. That evening, Elias led her not to her room, but to his. From his window, they could see the land they were building together. Are you sure? He asked at the doorway. I have never been more sure of anything." As they crossed the threshold, Ruth felt something she had not felt in years. She felt hope. It was not the desperate kind, but a steady belief in tomorrow. Two people, shattered by loss, had decided that just surviving was no longer enough. They wanted to live, together, and that simple, terrifying decision changed everything. The next morning, Ruth woke to find Elias already dressed, staring out at the mountains. He was wound tighter than a fiddle string. She knew he was second-guessing what happened between them. He turned, his face a mix of wonder and fear. He confessed that every good thing in his life had been taken away. His mother died when he was 12. His first wife passed when he was 23. Then 5 other women left him. He felt like he was the problem, that he was impossible to love. Ruth told him the truth. The problem was not who he was, but how he had tried to love. She said, "I am not staying because you are perfect. I am staying because we are learning how to do this together. You let me see your fear instead of hiding it." "What if I mess up and push you away?" he asked, his voice low. "Then I will push right back," she promised. "We will figure it out together. That is what partners do." He took her hand, admitting he was terrified. Then he told her the real source of his fear. Today marked 7 days since they had truly started building something. For him, 7 days was a curse. It was the exact amount of time every other woman had lasted before running away. He had been waiting deep down for her to leave too. Ruth looked him square in the eye. "Elias Crow, I am not leaving today or tomorrow. The only way I am going anywhere is if you put me on a horse and send me away yourself." "No more what-ifs," she said firmly. "We are writing a new story now." Elias finally let out a shaky breath, choosing to believe her. But she could tell the fear from 9 years of loss did not just disappear. Later that morning, Carson and his crew rode up. It had been 3 months, just as they had planned. But Elias tensed up immediately at the sight of them. "Easy," Ruth said quietly. "We knew they were coming. This is a good thing." Elias muttered, "Or it means we are about to see if we can trust these men on a ranch run by a half Apache." There was only one way to find out. Carson and his crew dismounted without an invitation. A new man, maybe 50 years old, spat on the ground and sized up Elias. "You expect us to take orders from him?" he asked. Ruth stepped forward. "You will take orders from both of us," she said, her voice like ice. "This is a partnership. If that is a problem, you can leave now." The man backed down, but the tension remained. Then Grace, one of the workers, asked what happened to a neighboring ranch. Tom explained the railroad bought them out for the water rights. Elias spoke up for the first time. "The railroad came to me, too. Offered me a fortune. I said no." The new man asked why. "Because," Elias said, "this land is not for sale. What I have built here matters more than money." The old-timer looked her square in the eye. "Name's Wilson. Been working cattle for 30 years. I can handle anything you throw at me. All I ask is a fair wage, a dry bunk, and decent grub." That kind of straightforward talk was rare. Ruth met his gaze. "We can provide that. $40 a month plus room and board. You'll work hard, follow our orders without question, and respect this place. You break those rules, you're gone. Is that clear?" It was. After looking over the rest of the hands, Ruth made her choice. "I'll take 3 of you," she announced. "Wilson, Grace, and Sarah." She turned to the other 2 men. "I appreciate you coming, but I need folks I can count on. You ain't it. Maybe next year." Carson scowled. "So we came all this way for nothing?" "You came here to be judged," Ruth said flatly. "And you were. That's something. Learn from it." After the rejected hands rode off, Ruth laid out the plan. "Wilson, you take the cabin by the barn. Sarah and Grace, you'll have to share a space for now, but we'll build proper quarters soon. Meals are in the main house." Wilson nodded. "When do we start?" "Right now," Ruth said. "Get settled. Tomorrow we start on the new water station. It's going to be tough work. Anyone having second thoughts? No one moved. Good, she said. Welcome to the Crow Ranch. Later in the barn, Elias watched her. You were incredible today, he said softly. I couldn't have turned those men away like that. You could have, Ruth replied, leaning against a stall. You just worry too much about being the Apache who won't give a white man a chance. They'll talk bad about us in town, Elias said. The half-breed and his eastern wife. Let him talk, Ruth said. Success is the only thing that'll shut him up. He pulled her into a hug, a rare moment of peace, before raised voices shattered it. Outside, Wilson and Sarah were nearly at each other's throats by the water pump. I've been on ranches since before you were born, girl, Wilson barked. I know what I'm doing. Doing it a long time doesn't mean you're doing it right, Sarah shot back. What's all this? Elias asked, his voice cutting through the argument. She wants to move the water station you planned, Wilson complained. Says she knows better. Building it where you marked will cause drainage problems, Sarah stated, not backing down. Move it 50 yards upstream and you use the natural rock. It'll last longer. Elias and Ruth walked over to the stakes they'd placed weeks ago. They studied the lay of the land, seeing it fresh through Sarah's eyes. After a long moment, Ruth spoke. She's right. The erosion would be a constant headache. Wilson looked stunned. So we're just taking her word over yours? We're taking facts over ego, Elias said calmly. Pride don't build a ranch. Good sense does. Later, Sarah approached them. Most bosses wouldn't have listened, especially not to a woman. We hired you for what you know, Ruth said. Speaking up when you see a problem is what we're paying you for. I think I am going to like working here. Good, because we plan to work you harder than you have ever been worked. But we listen to good ideas, we pay a fair wage, and we will treat you like a thinking person. That is the deal. That is more than most places offer. I will take it. That first dinner with the new hands felt strange. Their private life was suddenly on display. Strangers were in their home, watching every move. Elias felt it too, growing quiet and guarded. Later, as they washed dishes, Ruth broke the tense silence. Talk to me. What is wrong? He sighed, putting down a plate. I hate having other people here. I know we need them for the expansion, but I hate being watched. Our home is not ours anymore. It is still ours, Ruth said softly. We just share it. That feels the same to me, he replied. Like I have lost control. Ruth dried her hands. This is what you have to fight. You are not losing control, you are sharing it. To build our dream, we have to let people in and trust them. We cannot let fear of what might go wrong ruin this chance. I am trying, Ruth, he said, looking worn out. But some days, every bone in my body wants to send them all away and go back to just us. I know, she said. But you have to recognize that feeling for what it is. Fear, not wisdom. Sometimes fear keeps you safe, but sometimes it just keeps you from growing. You have to learn the difference. How? You ask yourself if the fear is based on real evidence or just ghosts from the past. Wilson and Sarah have done nothing but work hard. The fear is not about them. It is about your history, and you cannot let history steer your life. He pulled her into a hug, resting his chin on her head. That night, with Elias sleeping beside her, Ruth stared at the ceiling. They had faced the first big test, and Elias had not sabotaged them out of fear. The curse, if there ever was one, felt broken, but she knew that was only the beginning. The real work started now. They were building something real from the ruins of the past. Tomorrow, construction would start with a crew of strangers. It was a reckless, ambitious plan. But Ruth knew that playing it safe was just a slow death. Better to risk it all for a vision worth fighting for. Elias tightened his arm around her in his sleep. She had earned his trust, something he did not give easily. And he had earned hers by letting her see his fears, by valuing her opinion, and by choosing to grow even when it was terrifying. They were building more than a ranch or a marriage. They were building a true partnership, where two whole people could exist side by side. And that was worth every single risk. It was worth the fear and the uncertainty. Because even if they failed, they would fail together. And that was a whole lot better than succeeding alone. She drifted off to sleep, feeling warm from that simple thought. For the first time in forever, Ruth felt like she was truly home. She and Elias had built this ranch from nothing but heartbreak and hope. As she drifted off to sleep, he whispered, "Thank you for day 8. That simple number meant everything. It meant they had broken the curse. It meant they had a future. Their new ranch hands, Sarah, Wilson, and Grace, were working miracles, turning their dreams into reality faster than they ever could have alone. But that peace was short-lived. A strange yellow light filled the sky one morning. Ruth felt a pressure drop deep in her bones. She looked at Elias and said, "That is not just rain coming our way. That is a whole heap of trouble." Elias saw it too. A winter storm, the kind that could bring ice and snow and ruin. They had to move fast. They scrambled to get the cattle to the safety of a lower canyon and bring the horses into the barn. Everyone worked with a quiet urgency as the temperature plummeted. But you cannot reason with a Texas storm. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, followed by a stinging sleet that turned the ground into a sheet of ice. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an hour. Trapped in the house, they huddled around the stove. Wilson, one of their most experienced hands, spoke grimly. "Those cattle will be fine for a bit, but we will need to get feed to them tomorrow, or we will lose them." But Sarah, ever the realist, shook her head. "Going out in this is a death sentence. The wind could knock a horse right off its feet." Elias countered, "That herd of 30 head is everything we have. If they die, we are finished." Listening to them, Ruth felt the crushing weight of leadership. Every choice was a gamble. Finally, she spoke with a clear voice. "We wait until morning. Losing cattle is a terrible thing. Losing one of our own is unthinkable." Later that night, Elias found her staring into the blackness. "You made the right call," he said. Ruth leaned into him. "I chose to protect our people over our property. I just pray it was the right choice." "I am scared, Elias," she admitted in the dark. "One wrong move, and everything we have built could be gone." He held her tight. "Then we build it again, together. You do not have to be perfect. You just have to trust that I am here with you." His words settled her fears. They would face this together. Morning brought no relief. The storm was still raging. Elias came back from a quick look outside, his face grim. "It is bad, but we might be able to make it to the canyon." Ruth was already pulling on her coat. "Then I am going with you." He started to protest, but she cut him off. "We are partners. We face the danger together. End of story." The journey was a 3-hour nightmare. The wind felt like a physical blow and the ice was treacherous. Twice the heavy feed wagon nearly tipped over on the slick ground. It was only their combined strength that kept it upright. When they finally reached the canyon, the cattle were huddled together, cold and hungry, but alive. It took another hour of dangerous work on the icy rocks to get the hay distributed. By the time they finished, Ruth could not feel her hands, and every muscle ached with exhaustion. But looking at the herd, now safe and fed, she knew they had made the right choice. They had faced the storm, and won. The journey home was harder than the journey out. The storm howled back to life, and the world disappeared into a swirl of white. Halfway there, Ruth's horse lost its footing on a sheet of ice. It went down hard, throwing her into a deep snowdrift. For one awful second, she could not breathe or see. Then Elias was there, hauling her out, his hands shaking from more than just the cold. "Are you hurt? Talk to me." "I am fine," she gasped, her shoulder aching. "Just got the wind knocked out of me. Let us rest." "We rest when we are home," he said. "Move." They got the horse up and pushed on. The ranch buildings appeared through the blizzard like a miracle. Wilson and Sarah ran out to help with the horses. Inside, Grace had hot soup waiting and blankets warmed by the fire. They huddled close to the stove, exhausted and numb but safe. The cattle are fed and sheltered, Elias said through chattering teeth. They will make it. The crisis had shown Ruth something important. When the choice had to be made, she found she could carry the weight of leadership. And when Elias pulled her from the snow, she learned that accepting help was not a weakness. It was a form of trust. They had survived because together, they were stronger than the storm. In the weeks that followed, the ranch began to change. The workers stopped acting like hired hands and started acting like partners. Wilson began asking for her input. Sarah brought her ideas for improving the ranch. They were becoming a team, with each person's strength covering another's weakness. As the team grew stronger, the ranch thrived. Sarah's engineering saved them from a spring flood. Wilson's knowledge meant they lost only 2 cows all winter. By the time March arrived, the Crow Ranch had been transformed. It was no longer just surviving. It was alive and growing, built by everyone who called it home. With a solid crew, the ranch transformed. But the biggest change was in Elias. He learned to trust others, to lead with confidence instead of fear. The guarded man who was sure he'd fail learned to build something that would last. One spring evening, Ruth found him on the porch watching the sunset. "I've been thinking," she said, taking his hand. "It's time to expand. We can handle 10 more head of cattle, but that means hiring more hands and building another cabin." "That's a big step," he said, though she could see the excitement in his eyes. "It's a big risk. We'd need a loan." "I know," she said. "The things worth having are always the scary ones." He squeezed her hand, a smile finally reaching his eyes. "All right then," he said, "let's get to work." They decided to take a huge risk and borrow money to expand the ranch, putting up everything they owned as collateral. Elias looked at the fading light on the mountains. "Let us do it," he said, his voice full of a new certainty. "Let us build something that lasts, something that proves this town wrong about us." As they planned their future under the stars, Ruth realized the ranch was no longer just his. It had become theirs, their land, their dream, their life. The next morning, Ruth woke up feeling strange. Her stomach was unsettled, and she felt a new tenderness in her body. Then, all at once, she understood. She sat on the bed, her hand resting on her stomach, as the impossible truth settled in. She was pregnant. The feeling was a mix of pure joy and bone-deep terror. She had lost children before, and the fear of that pain was overwhelming. Elias found her sitting on the bed, frozen, with tears rolling down her face. "What is wrong?" he asked, his voice tight with worry. "I am pregnant, Elias," she whispered. His face was a storm of shock, then joy, and then a fear so great it mirrored her own. He sank down beside her and took her hands. "I am terrified," he admitted, holding her so tight she could feel him shake. "After what happened with Desti—" "I know," she said, her voice trembling. "I have already buried 3 children. I am scared too." They held each other, letting the heavy reality sink in. Then Elias pulled back, his jaw set with determination. "We are going to do this differently. We will get you the best medical care there is. I will bring a doctor from the city if I have to. We are not taking any chances this time." "I will not be wrapped in cotton wool," Ruth said. "I'm going to keep working and living my life, just more carefully. I can still manage the books and oversee the ranch. Being pregnant does not make me helpless." Elias struggled for words. I cannot lose you, Ruth. I barely survived losing Desti. Losing you and the baby would break me completely." Ruth held his face in her hands. "Then we will do everything we can to make sure that does not happen. We will be smart, and we will be careful. The rest is not in our hands." A few weeks later, Mrs. Bledsoe from town showed up unannounced. "You should be resting more," she said, watching Ruth direct some workers. "A woman in your condition should not be in the sun all day. With your age and what happened to Crow's first wife, well, people worry." "People should mind their own business," Ruth replied, though her tone was even. Mrs. Bledsoe looked a bit ashamed. "I suppose that is fair. But truly, If you need help when the time comes, you only have to ask. No woman should face that alone. After she left, Sarah gave a dry smile. Funny how the town decides to care now that you're carrying Crow's child. Ruth knew it was not about her, but what she represented. Still, Sarah had a point. Having women who know about childbirth could be a blessing, she said. It is just smart planning. Ruth hated to admit it, but she was right. Stubborn pride would not help deliver a baby safely. You are right, she said. I will accept help if it is offered with a good heart. But I'm still bringing in my own doctor from St. Louis. The ranch continued to grow as spring turned into summer. They hired 4 more workers and secured better prices for their cattle. But the large loan they had taken out weighed heavily on Ruth's mind during sleepless nights. Elias remained her anchor. We are not going to fail, he would tell her when she worried. We cannot afford to, so we will not. Forward is the only way to go. His certainty became her own. By late summer, the ranch was transformed. Where one small house stood, now there were buildings for 8 workers. Where 30 cattle once grazed, now there were 50 on better pasture. In October, on a cool autumn morning, Ruth's labor began. She faced it with Elias by her side and a community of women around her, including Mrs. Bledsoe and Sarah. The doctor from St. Louis was calm and modern, but he wisely listened to the experienced ranch wives when complications arose. The baby was turned wrong, and there was too much bleeding. It was the mix of new medicine and old wisdom that saved both mother and child. Elias's son was born just after midnight, screaming his arrival to the world. Ruth held him with shaking hands, amazed at the tiny face that felt both new and familiar. He has your eyes, Elias said, his voice thick with emotion and tears streaming down his face. We did it, Ruth whispered. You survived. You did the hard part. We survived together, she corrected him. They named him Daniel, after Ruth's father. He was born into a world that might not be kind to him, but he had a family that would fight for him. The weeks that followed were a blur of sleeplessness and wonder. Ruth found a strength she never knew she had, and Elias discovered he could live with his fear. He was terrified of losing them, but he chose to love them anyway. He cared for his son and his wife, knowing that love was worth the risk. By the time Daniel was 2 months old, Ruth was slowly returning to her duties. The ranch had grown so much that their main job now was management and planning, not daily labor. One snowy evening in late December, they sat by the fire with Daniel sleeping in his cradle. Do you remember your letter to the marriage agency? Ruth asked. The one that made me come here? I said I needed someone who could handle hard work and a quiet man, he recalled. You also said you needed a partner, not a decoration, she added. Someone who understood that survival out here meant everyone works. Did I give you what you needed? Ruth smiled. I think we both got more than we ever expected. I came here looking for a way to survive, but I found a life worth living. I thought I was getting a second chance, but I found something just as precious. A partnership built on honesty and respect. Elias took her hand. I thought I was looking for someone who could put up with me. Instead, I found someone who saw me for who I was, and chose me anyway. His voice cracked. That is more than I ever thought I deserved. You deserve everything, Elias, she said softly. You always did. It's a powerful thing when folks' wrong ideas about you get proven wrong for good. Sitting there by the fire with their boy Daniel sleeping soundly, Ruth thought about that. She remembered arriving as a heartbroken widow, the 6th woman to try and make a life with Elias. She could have easily been another one who ran, but every choice, from answering that ad to staying past the 7 days everyone whispered about, led to this moment. She chose to fight for a partnership, not just for safety. They had built something real, not some storybook romance. It was a partnership that showed true strength comes from being honest about your fears. What's on your mind? Elias asked, his voice soft in the quiet room. I'm just grateful I stayed, she said. Choosing you was the best choice I ever made. Our son is going to grow up seeing what a real partnership looks like, with two whole people building something together, not one fixing the other. Elias took her hand and kissed it gently. I love you, Ruth Crow. I ought to say it more. I love you for seeing the real me and for believing in this place when nobody else did. I love you for fighting off coyotes and for being scared but doing what needed doing anyway. Tears welled up in Ruth's eyes, but they were happy tears. I love you too, Elias, for letting me in and for learning to trust again. You gave me a reason to run toward life instead of away from it. Just then, Daniel started to stir, ready for his feeding. But for that one perfect moment, with the snow falling outside and the fire crackling inside, Ruth just soaked it all in. The supposed curse was broken, not by magic, but by hard work, honest talk, and the courage to take a chance on love after loss. Their life wasn't a fairy tale, and that's what made it beautiful. It was just two people who had known terrible loss and chose to risk their hearts one more time. Folks said the half-Apache rancher was cursed. They figured the widow from back east would turn tail and run. But together they proved that the best stories are about broken people finding each other and building something whole. That rancher found his partner. That widow put down roots. The very same fire that folks claimed had run off 5 other women now kept this new family warm. It wasn't destiny. It was a choice. They chose to stay when it was hard and to trust when it was terrifying. And the life they built together, a family born from hope, was their reward. It was more than enough. It was everything. It was home. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.